Welcome to It's Not About the Money, a podcast in search of grounded fundraising. I'm Heather, and together with my co-host Andy, we look beyond the quick tips and formulas. Join us as we explore the nuance and complexity of ministry fundraising. If you want to thrive in partner development, not just survive it, this is the place for you. Welcome back, everyone. We are back today to recap the episode with Michael Card. Andy, tell us a bit about our guest today.
Yeah, we have with us Brent Bovitz, and I guess, Brent, we'd like for you to tell us and tell our listeners a little bit about why we invited you into this episode, other than the fact that you are the unofficial president of the Michael Card fan club.
I'm one of them for sure. About 4 years ago, I worked for a sending organization that I had the privilege of being able to help coach a lot of people in this journey of support raising, as well as being able to do it myself. Actually, early on in college, discovering the joys and complexities of raising support. So, and even currently, I get to do it as well in my current role as a youth pastor.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we are excited to have Brent here with us today. One, because when I ran into him recently and told him that we were doing an episode with Michael Card, he was pretty excited about that. So we definitely thought he would be a fun person to talk Michael Card with. But on top of that, as he said, Brent works with youth and people that are really trying to figure out a sense of calling or step into what the Lord might have for them, down the road. And so we thought it just might be helpful to have his perspective in listening to some ideas that Michael holds, and then his own awareness of what this generation, how they think and the way they make decisions.
And you spend a lot of time with this age, with high schoolers. I guess you'd still call them Generation Z.
Yes.
Technically, yes. Right? Yeah, so I think we're curious to hear some of your perspectives, and maybe the word calling feels a little too heavy, a little too weighty for this demographic or this age group, but just help us to process, how do they make decisions? What are some of the uniquenesses for this particular group, this age?
Actually, one of the things that we have to remember talking about this, about Gen Z, and this is in general, of course, is that this is a generation that thinks pretty deeply. They, at least if I can speak for my generation here, we were a lot of the, put your head down, don't ask a ton of questions, and let's just push through. And of course, there's exceptions. But this generation that I've found time and time again, they love to ask why. They won't just take an answer and take it as
accept it.
They just won't accept it. That's right. They really want to know the why behind things, and I've come to really appreciate that. And it's a joy to have them even challenge me, being someone older, and decisions and how we view life, and even discover just the complexities of what it means to live. And so, and even in regards to calling, I actually do think that it's not something I hear a ton, but it is something talked about. They're just not using the word calling.
Sure.
If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, I think that what kind of plays into this is obviously friends have a big play a big role in the formation. Gosh, all of our friends play a big role in our formation as well.
For sure.
But especially for them. And they're asking a lot of deep questions. The problem is, where are they finding their answers?
Right.
And that's really, that's where I love to step into kind of that gap and provide a little different perspective, what in biblically speaking, we call wisdom, and how to think about life and to make decisions and even to wrestle with things like calling.
A counterpoint to what they found on the internet.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Or the good-looking meme on Instagram.
Right.
That just sounds amazing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Brent. I am excited for this conversation. So let's get started. What stood out from the episode?
Well, other than the fact that one of the most influential men for Michael Card was a guy named William, and he called him Bill a few times. I have a William in my life as well. The reason I even came to faith was because of a guy named William who went by Bill. So that was substantial. We're connected. Michael and I we're way back. Basically, yeah. But one of the things that really stood out to me from what Michael said is the way he described imagination in its role. I think it's fascinating how Michael, he talks about how his calling, he's believed that he wants to teach the scriptures And yet there's this man that has written some of the most profound music that puts words to feelings I've never been able to put words to. And even books that even listening to the podcast, I was like, I didn't know he'd written so many books.
Yeah.
And I thought I was the president of the fan club.
Right.
I didn't know what I didn't know.
Unofficial. Yeah.
Unofficial, totally unofficial. And so, and the way he's described how imagination bridges, it's that bridge between the mind and the heart, and even the expression of our calling and how you discover what your calling is. I thought, that the imagination piece was really substantial for me.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, that's a good one. I love the imagination piece. I think, I don't know if it was ever said explicitly when I was growing up, but there was an association between a connection between imagination and fantasy, and it was always kind of like frowned upon. Like, you don't want to live in a fantasy world. You want to live in reality. And so I don't think it was ever, like I said, verbally condemned, but there was a sense of let's base ourselves in the cold hard facts. And so it was refreshing.
Yeah, it is. Another person I deeply respect, a pastor who passed away recently, Eugene Peterson.
Oh yeah.
Really love, and he talks about how he loves to engage the minds, the imagination of those he teaches to, and even he talks about teaching to kids. And it's just fun. And he's like, we have something to learn from the younger generation, that they still have this aspect of their imagination that's just running. And when our imaginations get stirred up, even as we read the scriptures, I think we actually start to discover a little bit more of the real Jesus. And or else we're just reading a book. It's just without the imagination, we're not really engaging. In my opinion, we're not able to really go as deep as someone like Michael Card, who is actually sharing what he's learning, because I think that man, and like many others, have worked hard at cultivating an imagination, and it does take work, but it's worthy work.
It's good.
Yeah. I just have to say really quick, this is a deviation, but I do have to say, I found it really striking that both Josh Lindstrom and Mike Card acknowledged in their kind of telling us about their calling that they never wanted to be what they became.
Right.
Josh said he did not want to be a pastor.
Right.
Thought that was lame.
Yeah.
And Mike Card said he did not want to be a musician. He thought that was lame.
Or a pastor. Yeah.
Yeah, or a
It comes
pastor.
From a long line of pastors, and everybody around him is a musician, and therefore he wants to be a forest ranger.
Yeah. So I just thought it was really interesting that they both ended up having actually like tremendous, I'm hesitant to say success, but truly success. They've really had a voice, an opportunity to influence for such good going into those spaces that they originally said, no, not for me.
Right. I wonder if there's a pattern there. I sense it even in my own life. I told the Lord I never want to be a teacher. Because my parents and grandparents and my sibling is a teacher. His wife is my own wife is a teacher. I'm surrounded by them. But for 8 years, he called me to be a teacher.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Again, probably not a formula. Don't think of something you want to do and then say, don't make me that, so that then you can do it.
Yeah. Lord, I really
Reverse
don't
psychology with
want to
God.
Yeah. I really don't want to play in the NBA, Lord.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
No, but that was really interesting.
I would even add my own story to that one. The fact that I'm a youth pastor is absolutely hilarious. I didn't grow up going to youth group. So now I'm like, I can't believe I'm what most people envision as a youth pastor. I'm like, I'm that guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wear off-brand Vans and slightly skinny jeans. It's like I became the thing I didn't think I'd become.
Hey,
but I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess I will ask, how many youth ministers do you know that make their high schoolers listen to Michael Card on a retreat? Because you told me you did that.
I did. Not many. That's a whole nother thing. I love to teach students not only the Word of God, but how to listen well and to listen to quality music, and not just, how I would describe it is not candy, but giving them a solid meal within the music world.
Give them a meal.
Give them a meal.
Yeah.
That's right. With the candy bar at the end. That's fine. That's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
We all enjoy dessert.
Yeah. Well, as you said, I think that Michael Card really has many, many good things to say. And I guess something else from this podcast that I just wanted to bring up was his highlighting that calling is discipleship. Calling is coming back to Jesus, or, we're called, we go out, we come back to Jesus, and really just, I guess, being shepherded by him through like our days. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Heather, I loved how he admitted that there's just been this long process of him questioning his own calling.
Mm-hmm.
I think that resonated with my own soul on some deeper levels. Even within the last 3 years, I'm like, I have questioned my calling more than I could possibly imagine. And I never thought I would, but it was, and I think he fleshed it out beautifully, is like, there's this, in the questioning, there's a response to be had. And how I respond matters. He ran to Jesus. He talked about this rhythm from Mark 3, chapter 3 to 6, and it's always just going back to Jesus. And because of this tension and the turmoil and the discomfort of questioning the very thing that you thought you were supposed to be doing, he went back to Jesus, and in that he discovered more of who Jesus really is, therefore who he really was, and he continued to be able to walk forward in faith. And I'm like, I totally resonate with that, because I can't tell anyone with, as a matter of fact, looking them in the eye saying, yeah, I'm 100% confident in my calling and I know exactly what I need to do every single day. That's just not the case. I think God has allowed us to experience the tension and the discomfort to bring us back to him, to continue to discover who he really is.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I guess, Andy, I'm going to put you on the spot, but in the time you spent overseas, how often were you just perfectly settled in the decision you had made and in kind of the calling you were walking out?
There were moments of, for lack of a better word, of like flow, right? If you're familiar with that term psychologically, like, you're just, everything is clicking. And so there was a definite sense of, okay, Lord, this is where I'm supposed to be in this moment. But as a year rolls around, you're always questioning, like, okay, am I supposed to stay for another year? How many years? What about my kids? So there's always stuff in the background. But I would say, yeah, when I was up in front of a classroom and teaching and engaging them, it felt right. Yeah.
That's good.
Can we talk a little bit about mixed motives?
Ooh.
Yeah, let's do it.
That really stood out to me.
Yeah.
What did you think about that? I thought it was hilarious that he picked up the guitar to attract girls, quote unquote. That's where it all started. Obviously a mixed motive. So how do we feel about that? Can God use them? Should we feel bad about having mixed motives that aren't strictly connected to like the Great Commission? So what if you want to I also want to see the world and experience culture and broaden my horizons. Does that somehow weaken my call?
I think I have two quick thoughts. One, God's given us all desires, right? Like he's wired us specific ways. He's given us wants, dreams, hopes. And even within those, there's something that's really good and that pleases the Lord, that glorifies God. But also mixed in there are motives that are, sure, selfish, right? But what I love about the complexity, the mystery that God even is in his own character and the extent that he allows us to know him is that he basically says, we're going to work all that out. I think there's the verse in Philippians where he says, whatever I'm going to begin in you, I'm going to carry it on to completion. And so to me, that just means I promise I'm going to stick with you through the ups, the downs, the rights, the lefts, and it's going to work out. I think, there's that desire piece. And even the second point, I would say, I don't know if we could ever unravel perfectly the good desires and the bad desires. I think we're too complex for that. And I think there's an aspect of God, I trust you. I'm gonna lay before you. This is also that aspect of coming back to Jesus. I think I'm gonna lay before you my mixed desires. I'm gonna acknowledge the fact that I selfishly want to see the world. I selfishly want to have support only last 3 months, and I want to be successful in teaching, whatever it is.
Support raising,
right. That's exactly it. But there's also really good things. I really do, though. At the same time, want to see. I want to see people come to faith. I want to see you work in me and around me, and I think God is so good through His Spirit to help us work that out. And even as we grow older, someone even like Michael Card to even say, who's way more mature than I am, way wiser, has experienced more life, to say I have mixed motives. And I think the older we get, the more we acknowledge them and know how to lay them at the feet of Jesus and move forward. Easier said than done.
Right.
I think the other piece of what he was saying, in addition to mixed motives, he also talks about how the Lord uses our mistakes. I think that's also powerful.
Basically, nothing's wasted. The experiences, even our failures, is part of the process that God has us in, and whether we participated or caused that failure or not is up for debate. But it is still part of the process and part of God's God's process of maturing us and helping us become more like his son.
Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but it was really meaningful to me that he used so many of the Greek words to help us understand more deeply what a passage was trying to communicate. I'm not going to say those words here because honestly, I'm not even sure how they're said or how they're spelled. But you guys know what I'm talking about when he talks about the gaze?
Yeah, the gaze. Yeah.
Or when he talks about how we are authoritative representatives. I felt like those examples were really powerful for giving more context.
Yeah, I think, even as you guys have been teachers of the English language, how difficult it can be to teach English. And also sometimes the English language doesn't encapsulate the experience, the feeling that you want, where other languages, even like Greek words that we can't pronounce, just seem to just do it in one foul swoop. And it just makes you connect on a deeper level of like, that's exactly the experience, the feeling that I have in this journey that God has me on. And almost like for me, at least personally, it ties me back to generations before me of people, of believers that have felt the same thing. There's like a familial experience and you're like, this isn't new. God is still good. And it's going to be okay. And I know that's overly simplistic. One could argue, but I that's how I feel. Yeah. There's just like, I'm with my family, and this is part of it, if that makes sense.
Good. Well, Brent, what else? I'm looking over here at your notebook, and you have very nice handwriting, by the way.
Wow, thank you.
Well, what are some other things that really kind of shone for you?
I genuinely mean this from the bottom of my heart. I love Jesus. I would love to spend the rest of my life discovering more about not only what Jesus said, but the life of Jesus. What struck me was what Michael Card is working on, that book of his. I'm like, you can have my money now. Because if you're already doing the work, I would just love to glean, from their work. But he talks about this. He's like, Jesus really is this man for others. And so much of the call, so much of the life of a follower of Jesus is trying to embody that. And what's beautiful is he's given us all these different gifts to embody that and express it differently. But also there's this like weighty cost that comes with it. But the more you take on the cost, I think you start to experience the joy that he talks about of what it really means to step out in faith, whether it's support raising or even just sharing your faith with somebody. I don't even know. You start to taste what Jesus was really talking about.
And I love that Michael brought up the idea as he's thinking about all these instances of Jesus interacting and the miracles that he's doing. It seems like never once does he do it the same way.
Yeah. He doesn't have a formula.
He doesn't have a formula.
Or a program.
Right. There's no program. There's no formula. He always says something different. And I think I'm asking myself, why did he do it that way? And I just wonder if there was a reason for his inconsistency, and if one of those reasons was he knew that we would always look for a pattern, and we would tend to elevate the pattern, maybe just above the process or above like his spirit behind doing those things. So I think for me, a very real application for fundraising. And he brought it up too, like people need to be dealt with individually. And that was convicting to me because we want to have a system. We want to have a program that we can strap it in a binder. We can staple it together. We can hand it out. We can put it in a podcast and say, this is going to work all the time. But I love that admonishment that people are individuals.
Yeah, we are wired to connect with one another. And there's something that happens when you connect with another human being, even especially through story and caring for someone else. I recently have a friend who is now jumping into support raising in his 40s, and that brings its own fears and worries as well with the whole family. And I bumped into him recently, and he was like, I'm really enjoying this because now every time I sit down, I have the opportunity to enter into people's stories and hear what's going on. And sometimes he's like, most of the time, I have no idea what to expect. I'm coming in to hopefully, talk about being a supporter and having starting that kind of relationship. But more often than not, I usually sit, I listen, I enter in, I say whatever the Lord might be having me say. And that's about it. And he goes, and I walk away more refreshed, and God has continued to provide the support that my family and I need in this season. And I thought that was just really encouraging. And to your point.
That's an awesome perspective because I think it runs contrary to the image that a lot of people have about fundraising. That is, I got to master my spiel. I got to get my PowerPoint and all my stuff together. I really got to hit my pitch and everything. That doesn't sound like what he's doing at all.
Not at all. He's one of the greatest lovers of people I've met. And it's amazing to watch him in this process. And even he himself, he's like, it's changing me. You know, the uncomfortability of raising support at this stage in life,
right?
Coupled with when you meet with people, you just don't know how God's going to use that person across the table to shape you.
Yeah.
God uses all means, all kinds of people, Sunday morning, outside of Sunday morning, to shape us. Yeah. And it's cool.
Yeah. And, you know, that speaks to something else that Mike said in the podcast, was just that really emphasizing that people need to see the sincerity and they need to see a person, they need to see the need. And that's why, you know, you don't have to meet with someone face-to-face. It's not like that's an essential part of the formula. However, that face-to-face embodied communication gives opportunity for people to see and feel the sincerity and to see and feel the need. Okay, guys, so kind of bringing this to a close, because we do want to keep these episodes shorter than the original. Why do we feel that this conversation around calling was important?
I think for me, it's the reminder that calling isn't polished. It's not smooth. It doesn't head one direction. It's not formulaic. It's a process. It's a journey that hopefully, by God's grace, leads us closer to Him and even and closer to people in the process. For me, that's what stuck out to me in this time, and it's what I want to walk away with.
I think for me, the overwhelming thing is that we can't expect to have the full picture of our calling before we start. I think we just got to dive in. We just got to put one foot in front of the other. Maybe He redirects us along the way. But the worst thing I think you can do is just remain paralyzed and static and unchanging and unwilling to engage. That failure to launch, that to me is kind of the cardinal error.
Yeah. Or failure to pause, you know, to get in view, this is what I'm going to do, and maybe stop listening or going back to the shepherd as you come across things, and then just kind of like plowing through and plowing forward. And especially in the context of fundraising, we really try to provide space to encourage people that are seeing a lot of difficulty or discouragement as they are walking through the fundraising process. I would also caution those that are seeing a lot of success, you know, make sure that you're still making the time to meet with the Father, to go back to Jesus. Just because the funding is coming in does not mean you don't need that shepherding care.
Yeah, at the end of the day, what we all long to hear, I believe, is well done, good and faithful, not well done, good and successful. I think we need to remember that.
Yeah. That's a great note to end on.
It's a great note to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brent, for joining us today. Next time, we will be back talking with Dr. Steve Shadrach, exploring some of the fundamental principles in fundraising. We'll catch you then.
It's Not About the Money is presented by Provisio Fundraising Solutions. Provisio equips support-based workers with flexible training, practical resources, and one-on-one coaching. Find out more at provisiofundraising.com.